Good evening, class. Today in Unit 2, we will be discussing the Communications Management Plan. A Communications Management Plan is laid out in order to create the processes and procedures in which all communication as it relates to the project will be completed. It also provides a communication framework that will be used to meet all the communication requirements. This framework will then outline the responsibilities of each team member on the project as well as the stakeholders involved. In addition, it will provide an approach of how meetings will be conducted, by whom, their frequency, and over what deliverables. When it comes to setting up meetings, there are 9 guidelines for meetings to which to follow. 1 is to set a time limit and stick to it. 2 is to schedule recurring meetings in advance. 3 is to have them regularly but not too often. 4 is to make sure they are purposeful. 5 is to create an agenda prior to the meeting. 6 is to distribute the agenda before the meeting starts. 7 is to stick to the agenda. 8 is to bring the right people in. And 9 is to document and publish these meetings. Within any sort of communication, there are going to be what's called a communication blocker. That is something which can create a divide between people and can impede the flow of effective communication. Communication blockers can create a loss of enthusiasm to communicate and can completely break down the communication between people. Very often, people end up using communication blockers in their own communication, sometimes intentionally and sometimes unintentionally without even being aware of it. Communication blockers can really create a wall between people and create immense emotional distress and can potentially be the downfall of any project. There are several different types of blockers, but here are a list of a few. 1 is accusing people. 2, judging people. 3, insulting people. 4, using sarcasm. 5, globalizing. That means using words such as always, never. 6, threats or orders by use of power. 7 is interrupting people. Now there are many more ways and many types of communication blockers that are out there, but these 7 were the most commonly used according to the PMBOK. Communication is the only way we can effectively engage with people and exchange our views and thoughts. It involves a huge amount of emotions and feelings from different people. Communication blockers are some of the most common yet most destructive sins of communication. Hence, we need to be careful and conscious about avoiding communication blockers at all costs. Next, we're going to talk about communication methods. Generally speaking, there are 3 different types of communication methods. 1 would be an interactive communication method style. This is reciprocal in nature. Here, one person provides information to another, the other person receives that information, and then they respond to it. This can best be described as a conversation, instant messaging, conference calls, things of that nature. Next would be a push method. That is one way in nature. Basically here, one person provides information, but does not expect or receive feedback from the other receivers. That would be an example of status reports, company memos, email updates, etc. The next would be a pull communication method. Here, the sender places the information in a central location, and the receiver is responsible for retrieving it themselves. This is an effective way to deliver large documents or to a large quantity of people on like a company intranet page. When deciding which method to use, ask if feedback is needed or if it is enough to simply provide the information. There's never a perfect answer as far as which one is the best method of communication. It all depends on what you need and how many people need to receive it. Lastly, we're going to talk about praising and disciplining your employees. When it comes to praising and disciplining employees, there are a few things that I personally have learned from my time in the field as a manager in both my days in the Army and my current career. The most important thing, though, is to understand that every employee is different. Not everyone responds the same way to the same thing. Some people like to be praised individually and a pat on the back, while others like to be praised in front of other people in a big crowd. Some people don't mind being called out in front of other employees for their mistakes, while others will not likely take too kindly to being called out in front of others, and it might cause them to make more mistakes. So the most important thing to do is to understand what makes your own employees tick. As for discipline, I like to follow a progressive discipline model, something like my work currently uses. Here we have a 5-step model. The first is a documented informal verbal communication, basically stating, hey, we talked about it, don't do it again. The next step is a documented formal verbal communication. Here it goes from, hey, don't do it again to, we're documenting it now, and this is the first step in the process. Third is a documented written communication, basically where we are actually writing up what you did wrong. The fourth step would be probation, documented, of course, and then the last step would be termination. Communication is the key to success for any project. Any lack of communication or derailment in this communication could inevitably cause the project to completely and utterly fail.